Hello, algebra students. Today we are going to review all the different stuff that we've been working on with factoring and with solving equations once we have used some factoring. So let's take a look at some of these problems. They're going to look very much like what your assignment is going to be today. So make sure that when you are looking at the problems today, you are reading the directions very carefully. Some of the problems you're just going to be simplifying. Some of them you're going to be factoring, and some of them you're going to be solving. So make sure that you're looking to see, is there an equal sign? Am I figuring out what the x is equal to, or am I just doing some multiplying? So for instance, these are just simplifying problems. On these, there are no equal signs. There's no possible way for you to say what the x is equal to. So when I am doing this kind of problem, I'll be distributing here. So on this first problem, I'll have x times 3x would be 3x squared. And then minus 2x. And that's really all I can do on that problem. There's nothing else. That one is totally simplified. X and x squared don't combine. They're not like terms. That one's done. In the second problem, I'm going to have that double distribution, or your teacher may have talked about this in terms of FOIL if they've used that acronym. But we've got x times 2x would be 2x squared. And then we would have, that's going to be a positive 1x, and this is going to be a negative 10x. So positive 1x, and I can write that out, plus 1x and minus 10x. And then we would have negative 5 and positive 1 would give me a negative 5. So I would want to combine my like terms right here, and I'll have 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. These problems are different because I am actually solving. However, I don't want to multiply these. I don't want to do any of my distribution or anything because they are already in factored form. And when they're in factored form and it's equal to 0, I want to use that zero product property. So I already have two things, for instance, that are being multiplied together to be equal to 0. So I would want to be able to say, for instance, in this first problem, that x plus 4 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So you can show some work on that, or you can just say, well, what number plus 4 gives me 0? That would be negative 4. Or in the second one, what number minus 2 would be 0? That would be negative 2. In the second problem, the first equation that I'm going to write is going to be pretty easy, right? X minus 8 equals 0. That one you can do in your head. That one's just going to be x equals 8. The second one, though, you might not be able to do in your head as easily. So I'll have 5x plus 6 equals 0. I would need to subtract 6 and get 5x equals negative 6, and then divide by 5. So you could leave that as negative 6 over 5. You could change that to negative 1 and 1/5 or negative 1.2. I personally like the negative 6 over 5. Just leave it as an improper fraction. Sorry about this. I forgot that my computer isn't going to be happy with this one. Okay. This is now asking you to factor. There's no equal sign. I don't have to solve this. I just need to get two sets of parentheses. So I would start with my x and my x to get the two factors. This sign right here is the first one that we're going to look at, even though it's not the first sign. But that is what tells me that I've got the same signs. And once I know that they're the same signs, I would look at this sign and say, oh, that tells me that they are both plus. So I need numbers that multiply to be 4 and add to be 5. Well, those two numbers are going to be 4 and 1. I could have switched those two numbers around and had the 1 in the first factor and the 4 in the second factor. Because they are the same signs, it wouldn't have mattered at all what order I put those in. In these two problems now, I have to factor it, but it's also equal to 0. So I do have the factoring step and the zero product property. We're going to put all of it together. So I've got two sets of parentheses to get my factors, x and x. This sign right here tells me I've got different signs. So one's a plus and one's a minus. I need numbers that multiply to be 18, but because they're different signs, they subtract to be 3. So that would have to be 6 and 3. And if I've got a plus 3 right here, my big number always matches that sign. So I've got more positives. The 6 is going to go here with the plus. 3 is going to go right here. So my zero product property says that either x plus 6 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. So what number plus 6 is 0? That would be negative 6. And what number minus 3 equals 0? That would be positive 3. The second problem is more tricky because there's a leading coefficient. As soon as we've got a number in front of the x squared, that does make it more tricky. I can still set up my two sets of parentheses, and having the 3 at the end does make this a little bit easier, but that 6 as the leading coefficient, that I have a couple of options for. It can either be 1 times 6 or it could be 2 times 3. The 3 as the constant over here, that only can be 1 times 3. So I have to find the combination that gets me 11 right here, right? So if I would try to put the 1 and the 6 together with the 1 and the 3, well, there's really no way that I can do that, right? If I put the 6 with the 3, that would be 18, and the 1 with the 18 and 1, even if I add or subtract those, there's no way I'm going to get to the 11. So the 1 and the 6, that's not going to work. And I should have tried putting the 6 with the 1 and the 1 with the 3, but I'd have 6 and 3 adding or subtracting those. That doesn't give me 11 either. So 1 and 6 is out. I know it's going to have to be the 2 and the 3 that are going to make the 6x squared. So I'm going to have a 2x and a 3x. Now I just have to know how to put the 1 and the 3 in there. If I'm going to try to get 11 as my linear term, my middle term, I need the 3 to get multiplied with the 3 to make 9, and then 2 to go with the 1, so 9 plus 2, that's my 11. So I need 3 to get multiplied with 3. Right there's a 3x, and then I would need the 2 to get multiplied with a 1, so I would have 9 plus 2 does give me 11, and looking at the signs, I ignored the signs until right now, but this does tell me I'm going to have the same signs. They are both going to be positives or pluses. So that is my factoring. Now, let me get rid of this stuff down here. After I've got all of that, I still have to solve this. So I would still have to say 2x plus 3 equals, sorry about that, plus 3 equals 0, and 3x plus 1 equals 0. And some of you might be able to do these in your head, and that's just fine if you can. I'm going to show some work right here. I'm going to subtract 3, so I've got 2x equals negative 3 divided by 2. So I've got x equals negative 3 over 2, or negative 1.5. Subtract the 1 on this one. 3x equals negative 1. And divide by 3, I've got that x equals negative 1/3. Whoop, that's not what I meant to do. Here we go. Okay, so come on, computer. And now, for these two problems, I don't know why my computer is being difficult right now. For these two problems, I first of all need to get them equal to 0 before I can go ahead and factor these. So in the first one, I would need to first get rid of that 5x. So I will need to subtract 5x from both sides. And when I write this, I would want to make sure that I'm putting this in the right order. So I'm going to have x squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0. Then I can factor it. And that's a pretty easy one to factor now. So we've got an x and an x. The minus in front of the 14 tells me that I've got different signs. Numbers that multiply to be 14 but subtract to be 5 would be 7 and 2. And because this is a negative in front of the 5, I've got more negatives. The 7 goes with the negative, 2 goes with the positive. At this point, you probably don't even need to write out the zero product property. You could say, what makes this factor equal to 0? What number plus 2 is 0? Well, that's going to be negative 2. And what makes this factor equal to 0? What number minus 7 is 0? That's going to be 7, right? In the second problem, again, we've got a leading coefficient. I still need to make this equal to 0. So I would start by adding 20. So I have 5x squared plus 29x plus 20 equals 0. And again, I know I have that leading coefficient, but this time, because the leading coefficient happens to be a prime number, which means the only numbers that go into 5 are 1 and 5, makes it a little bit easier in my mind. So I'm going to make this a 1x, or just an x, and a 5x. Now the 20, I know I've got some options. It can be 1 times 20, it could be 2 times 10, or it could be 4 times 5. I need to know which combination of those works with my 1 and 5 to make the 29 that I need as that middle term, that linear term. So take a second, maybe pause the video if you want to, and see which combination would work to give me 29. And through the magic of video, I already know that if I put the 5 with the 5, that would be 25. And the 1 with the 4, that would be 4. 25 and 4 is 29. So if I can multiply the 5x with another 5 right here, and then the 1 with the 4 way over here, that would give me my 29 that I need. And I know that I have the same signs and they're both pluses. So I'm going to have a plus here and a plus here. So what makes this factor equal to 0? Well, x equals negative 5. I can show my work on this one. 5x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4. 5x equals negative 4, and then divide by 5. So x is negative 4/5. Or you could write that as a decimal, negative 0.8 if you wanted to. All right, we have one last problem. This problem, you need to start by getting rid of the parentheses, which I know is kind of weird because a lot of our problems we're trying to get those parentheses. But this is in factored form, but it's not equal to 0. So we need to first do some multiplying. So I'm going to have x times x gives me x squared. That's a negative 8x, and a positive 5x should give me a negative 3x. And then 5 times negative 8 is going to be negative 40 equals 30. But I need that to be equal to 0. So let me subtract 30. And I'll have x squared minus 3x minus 70 equals 0. Now I can factor it. And I'll have different signs, so 1 plus and 1 minus. What numbers multiply to be 70, but subtract to be 3? Well, it's going to be 7 and 10, and this says that I've got more negatives. So I'm going to put the 10 here and the 7 here. So what makes this factor equal to 0? X equals negative 7. What makes this factor equal to 0? X equals positive 10. All right. That's very much like your assignment is going to be today. So I hope that that made sense. Right now, you should feel pretty comfortable knowing that you should be able to factor a trinomial and solve quadratic equations by factoring. Today's homework is a worksheet called Review of All Factoring. If you need any help, make sure that you reach out to your teacher. Good luck.